Are you terrified of birth? Because let me just tell you, you were not born afraid. Hi, I'm Carly Bonderud, and this is the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge, which you can get completely free on my YouTube channel. If you are not already on there, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Make sure you go back and check out some of my deep dive masterclasses, because the thing about my Empowered Birth movement is that information is free and I only charge for access to me. That means that everything that I put out is either do it yourself, where you can piece together all of the information that you want from my videos, my content on my YouTube channel, my Instagram, my website, or you can go the self-study path, which we do have two options, and I'll tell you more about that within this Reset Your Mindset challenge. But the first step is that you need to get past your fear. And the thing is that you can't get true natural birth information and filter it through a lens that's still afraid. If you haven't watched the first video, go back and watch that first before you dive in, because every single one of these trainings builds on the other one. And we're going to be going deep into your psyche so that we can uproot all of those fears and you can be re-educated for empowered birth. Whether you're trying to decide whether to have the epidural or to go natural, or whether you're trying to think about maybe avoiding a C-section or planning a C-section, or maybe you're even trying for a VBAC or not sure if you can have a VBAC, home birth or hospital, and you're going through the mom groups, or you're trying to get information, trying to figure out what path is right for you, the first step is truly aligning with what you want most. And what you want most is probably scary, because when I talk to first-time moms, and I usually ask them the question, what is your plan for birth? And they usually tell me, I want to go as natural as possible. I don't want a C-section. So then why is it that there's so many moms out there who have had one or more babies and they've had a C-section and they automatically plan to have another C-section? It's because they've now been traumatized. And then there's also the moms that think, oh, I'm just going to get the epidural with their first baby, and they don't even try for a natural birth. And I'm not shaming any moms for it, because you know what? I was there too. If you go back and watch the first video, or if you want a refresher, I did tell you that at one time in my life, before I had my first baby, I was the girl in the anthropology class who is basically saying, I don't want to be connected to my body for birth. I don't want to go through the pain of labor. I don't even know if I want to have a baby. But if I had a baby, I want to be knocked out and I want to have a C-section, because there's no way in hell that I'm going to go through natural birth. Are you crazy? That was my mindset. And then I went from being afraid of birth to, when I got pregnant with my son, saying, you know what? I'm going to have a home birth. Completely shocking my family, because everybody in my family believed that birth was painful and traumatic, and they knew I had a fear of needles, and they knew I couldn't handle pain very well. I didn't have a high pain tolerance. And so they're like, she's not going to be able to do it. They really didn't believe in me. And this ties into the Reset Your Mindset challenge. So again, if you've just stumbled across this video and you're curious, I'm going to let you know that this is actually a training series. This is a challenge. You need to go through every single piece of the challenge for this to work. And even if you go through and watch this one video, if you do not do all of the work that is necessary, you're only getting one piece of the overall puzzle. And then that leads to you being in what I call the trauma loop and the cycle of fear, and falling into the fear traps and information overwhelm, where you can't plan and get your natural birth. In fact, the reason I've created this Reset Your Mindset challenge is because I have something else that I'll tell you about later in this training called Your Empowered Birth Workshop. And I also have my book, Your Empowered Birth. But this is the step before you take those steps to get the empowered birth method, to have your beautiful, empowered, true natural birth experience, or just a beautiful, empowering birth that's not laced in fear and trauma and pain. So as you go through this training, I want you to be taking notes. I want you to be questioning things that you were taught. And this is basically going to help you recognize where those fears were and uproot them. And I'm going to also share my story and my empowered birth journey and what's possible when you get past your fear. Okay, so I'm really excited to get started with you. Thank you so much for staying with me at this point. I know that these videos can be quite long. The reason is because I go quite deep. These are master classes. So treat this the same way you would treat a birth class that you were paying for. And if you do want to support the Empowered Birth movement, you can support us by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. Learn about our philosophy and mission statement, learn about the courses and programs that we offer. I also have Your Empowered Birth on Amazon, so you can go and get a copy of that book. If you want to support in another way, like sharing the content that I have, that is even better. Paying it forward is something that I really do believe in. So please like, share, subscribe to this channel, pay it forward, pass these videos on, because I am committed to you having an empowered birth, whether you work with me directly or not, whether you purchase any of my programs. As long as you're getting that beautiful empowered birth experience, I know that I have done my job. I am so committed, of course, that information is completely free. You only pay for access to me. So let's get started with Day 2 of our Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge, your early birth education and why it matters more than you think. So first of all, I'm going to ask you the question, have you ever heard this before? Or maybe you've even said this. What if I don't go into labor on my own and I have to be induced? What if I don't dilate and have to have a C-section? What if my pelvis is too small or the baby is too big? What if they don't let me say no to whatever you don't want or let you do something like birth on your hands and knees? And then it's, what if I can't handle the pain? So we're going to be addressing those questions, and we're also going to be addressing the fear traps. What's undermining your confidence for birth? We're also going to go into the 4 sources of fear and what's influencing it, and your main source of fear and how it affects the other 3. So this is important information. Again, I talk more inside Your Empowered Birth about the right mindset, and that is basically what you need to do. Because every single one of those questions that were asked at the beginning, those fears, those what ifs, are secretly influencing your birth education and what you're choosing to do in your birth experience. And they are caused by these fear traps. So if you go through this entire challenge, which is going to be about 4 videos, and you're going to have homework assignments, by the end of the challenge, you're going to avoid making mistakes or decisions in your birth out of fear. And you're going to feel more confident in planning a natural birth and saying no to the most common interventions that actually sabotage your birth and make it more painful, traumatic, and that often also leads to an unnecessary C-section or an unnecesarian. Now, if you want to know more about natural birth versus true natural birth, you can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. I do have an overview telling you the difference. And the other thing you need to understand is that by the end of this challenge, you'll avoid crumbling under the pressure when your OB or midwife or nurse tries to scare you into going against your instincts and intuition of what your body is saying that you need. You're also going to avoid second guessing your own intuition or falling into those fear traps that society basically projects onto you when it comes to planning your true natural birth. I'm talking about things like you want to have a home birth and everybody around you is telling you that it's too dangerous, or you want to have an unmedicated true natural birth experience. You don't want anybody to touch you, and they're telling you that actually that's not going to happen. You need to have medical intervention. You need to have the vaginal exams. You need to have an IV just in case. You don't want a hemorrhage, so you need to make sure that you have Pitocin at the end, and all of the things that basically undermine your confidence and tell you that what you want is wrong or can't happen. So the question we're really addressing inside of this challenge is, why are we so terrified of birth? And I'm going to go deep into what these fear traps are. And I'm also going to tell you how this is being influenced in the 4 sources of fear. So there's 3 big reasons that you're afraid. Fear trap number 1 is the fear of pain. And I'm not just talking about the physical pain of natural birth. I'm talking about the pain of having to fight, beg, or compromise and having to keep having an uphill battle. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. I don't know if I have the strength to keep saying no. That kind of pain is just as prevalent as the pain of natural birth, because when you are afraid, you tense up. When you are anxious, you tense up. Birth is not something that you need to be tensing up for. You need to be able to release the pressure. You can't do that if you're fighting an uphill battle with the medical system or with your partner or with your family and friends, or even with your own self. This also leads into fear trap number 2, fear of something going wrong, especially if it did last time or you've been labeled high risk. So this is often when moms want to have a home birth, but they're told they're going to risk out of home birth, or what if something goes wrong? You should be in the hospital for your first one, or you should stay in the hospital for your second because the last one didn't go very well. It's really dangerous. What if the baby is in trouble? You're not at the hospital. And then moms basically compromise and they say, well, I'll stay home till the last minute and then I'll go in. But then they get to the hospital and they feel anxious again. And this is what happened to me, is I was laboring fine at home. It was very relatively painless compared to what it was in the hospital, but it was because I had to change environments and I didn't feel safe there. And as you go through this training, or if you go deeper with my book, Your Empowered Birth, you'll understand you really need the right environment for birth so that you're not afraid. And fear trap number 3, the reason why a lot of moms plan a home birth or plan to go in last minute, but they're not really confident and they're worried about something going wrong, and they end up sabotaging their natural birth, not intentionally, but because of these underlying fears. It's the fear of routine medical interventions and the pushback if you decline them. So if you don't want to have vaginal exams and you're afraid to say no to your care provider, you may stay home until the very last possible minute. But there might be a point in your intuition where you're saying, I need to get to the hospital and I need to be checked, but I'm also afraid of that because of this cascade of intervention. And that's where the empowered birth method comes in, where my clients know we are aiming for a true natural birth, and then we have our backup plans and we pull back only as much as we need. And in order for you to do that, you have to get past your fear. Because what I talked about in day 1 of the challenge is that people can and will project their fear onto you, and it's your job to either tune in or tune out. Well, the medical system has the same idea. They're going to project their fears because they don't see natural birth. And I'm going to go deeper into that in this challenge. But first of all, you have to recognize that these fear traps are secretly sabotaging your ability to plan and get your beautiful, ecstatic, natural birth. So why have we been taught to fear birth? Well, our fears basically come from 4 main sources. Our families of origin, who we grew up with, the stories we heard growing up, the family attitudes that were about birth. Were you told that the stork brings babies, or did they actually tell you the truth? And what truth did they really tell you? Did they tell you a positive view of birth, or is it painful and traumatic and you got to leave your dignity at the door? Oh, you're not going to care about getting the epidural and that needle in your spine because you're going to be in too much pain. It's a lifesaver. And, you don't want to have a home birth because something bad could happen. I feel better if you'd stay in the hospital because you don't know how you're going to be able to handle the pain. This is what my family said to me, by the way, especially when I was planning my home birth. They panicked. They absolutely panicked when I said that I was going to have my first baby at home. They said birth belongs in the hospital. And if that has been reinforced in your education, in your family, that is your first source, your first lens that you are filtering things through. Your second lens that you're filtering things is the media. And we're going to be addressing that in this challenge as well. TV, movie, the horror stories in our entertainment, the medical dramas on TV, like Grey's Anatomy and all the other ones, where they have these dramatic birth stories. And I actually did a rant on my Instagram not too long ago. Maybe you've seen it. You can also check YouTube for it. But I basically addressed this where they have these medical emergencies, and moms are saying, I want to have a natural birth. If you also look at 50 Shades of Grey, there is a scene, there's actual interaction where Anna is remembering her first birth, where she had basically wanted to have a natural birth. And the doctor's like, it's been 12 hours and the baby's not coming, and we are going to push Pitocin on you, and you need to have a C-section. And she's sitting there, she's like, I want to have a natural birth, I want to push. But then she ends up being basically manipulated into having the C-section, and she's remembering this, and she's like, I want to have a natural birth with this second baby. And Christian's like, no, Anna, you almost died last time. Please just have a C-section. And every time I read that, it's like, it's so unnecessary to the overall plot of the story, but it's so ingrained in our birth culture. And who knows, maybe the author was working through her own birth trauma, because that happens. We work through it through story. And I don't know what her experiences were as a mother, but I do know that this attitude in our media also is another lens that gets filtered through. So before you even come to formal education, you have the lens of the family and you have the lens of the media. And this can either reinforce a positive birth education or it can undermine it. And I'm going to be sharing examples based on my own upbringing, which was very fear-based, and also what I've been able to do with my kids, because my daughter does not have those fears. My son does not have those hang-ups. They understand what birth really can be because, I mean, I'm the empowered birth mom. I went out and I had an empowered birth. My son was there for the birth, and I'm going to share that story in this training. So the other thing, of course, is our formal birth education and our informal birth education, sex education, anything that you're learning about, that is also filtered through the lens of family and the media. And we're going to go deeper into this, and you're going to see how this all connects as we basically go through the pieces of this challenge. And finally, the last one is social conditioning and social media, the overall birth culture that we are immersed in, because that then reinforces and perpetuates the same fears, so that no matter how much education you have, it's just going to be an information overwhelm and a trauma loop. And I will be teaching you more about that when we get to day 4. So one of the key elements of empowered birth is to shift your mindset and unlearn what you were taught in the past. That's why my 5-pillar system, we have the right mindset, the right education, the right environment, the right facilitators, and the right support. And again, you can go deeper with that by reading your Empowered Birth, or check it out in the Empowered Birth book playlist on the YouTube channel. So now I'm going to ask you the question, what is your earliest memory of birth? How did your family of origin talk about it, or did they? Because one of the things I noticed is when I was asking the question, where do babies come from? Nobody would give me a straight answer in my family. I was fascinated by the fact that my aunt had gotten pregnant and my mom had gotten pregnant, but nobody would tell me how that baby got out. At one point, I thought they came out through the belly button because I had been told that my aunt had had a C-section. My mother had basically said it as, oh, well, normally they push the baby out, but in this case, she's getting a surgery and they're going to lift the baby out. But I didn't know anything about my anatomy, and it was very hush-hush in our family. I was the first one out of my entire family to use the proper anatomy terms, especially with my kids. So they would call it something that wasn't the right term. And I'd say, no, that's his penis. No, that's her vulva. No, we're not using cutesy terms. We're going to use the proper anatomy. No, my kids are actually going to learn where babies come from. Because I had had such a stunted education, by the time I got to be 6 years old and I got to school, I'd already seen birth depicted in the soap operas and I had seen it in movies. And what you're going to find out in this training is that if birth is not talked about in the home, kids will still go out and learn that information. Kids are not born afraid of birth. I was fascinated until I was taught to be afraid. So we absorb the unconscious biases and beliefs and values and fears from our cultural upbringing. And our early birth training can set the stage for our beliefs and value systems around pregnancy and birth and parenthood. So children who grow up with positive birth imagery are less likely to see birth as something fearful or abnormal. As you can see from this image, I am in labor with my daughter. It's still an early prodromal labor, but I am in labor. Do you see any fear on that child's face? He is just sitting there calmly rolling the water bottle onto my back. The birth doula is taking the picture for me to have this beautiful image of my son. And he's not even 3 years old yet. So he was like 2 months shy of his third birthday. And look how calm he is. Look how unafraid he is. I am rocking back on this birth ball. I am making sounds and he is unafraid. And even when I was going deep into my active labor the next night, the same thing. I told him I was singing the baby out and he started to make the sounds with me. He was not afraid. He went to sleep in his own bed because I had a home birth. And when he woke up, in the middle of the night, and my daughter had just been born, the doula brought him out to see her. And he's like, Hunter, tired. And he went back to bed. But in the morning, he was all excited. And he's like, baby out. It's like, she's finally here. It's like, yes, she is. There was no fear in this child's eyes at the fact that his mother was laboring naked in the pool. He was not even thinking that this was anything abnormal, because I didn't think it was abnormal. So our early training at home really sets the stage for how we respond to birth imagery in our society later on. And we're either going to accept or reject the later images and depictions based on what we learned as children. Another example of this is the fact that my daughter knows she's been born at home. She knows her birth story inside and out. Her brother was there. He knows what the birth story of his sister is. Even though he was as young as he was, these kids have been immersed in a positive birth environment. They have heard me teaching my workshops. They have watched me coach my clients. One of my clients, when I was on Zoom, my son came out of the room and he started fixing me food so that I could stay with my client and I didn't have to leave her. And he was getting me oatmeal and he was bringing things to me. My daughter was all excited. She wanted to stay at home. She didn't want to go to school that day because she's like, I want to stay for the birth. And I'm like, no, honey, no, you're going to school. And when you come home, then maybe my client might decide, because she was very close with my daughter. She adored my daughter. She was a boy mom, so she just loved that little girl energy. And it's like, maybe she'll let you see the baby after the baby's out. And the fact is that my kids are not afraid. So the question is, what if birth wasn't scary? Can you imagine if all kids grew up with this kind of early learning, or if you had grown up with that positive birth environment? How would that affect the way birth is perceived in our society? How might that affect the way that pregnant and birthing people are treated? And I say that because not everybody identifies as a woman. And also there are women that are carrying babies, but they don't identify as the mother because they're either giving that baby up for adoption or they are a surrogate. So we need to recognize that there are different pregnant bodies out there that may not necessarily be moms, but they still deserve to be treated with the same reverence and respect. And that's why I use that term. So it's not erasing women. I just want to be clear about that. I am empowering moms. My main focus is helping moms who are keeping their babies and identify as mothers who want to go on to have that beautiful empowered birth experience. However, if that is not something you identify with, but you are pregnant and you are looking for positive birth education, then my information will still help you. Okay, it will still help you. It will still transform you. And in other aspects of your life, it doesn't just have to be about motherhood, it can be about standing firmly in your power. So, the other thing I'm going to ask is, would we automatically be seen as decision makers in our care if birth was not perpetuated in our families as being this dangerous, horrific thing, and we weren't afraid and looking outside of ourselves to be reassured? Well, that is what your homework is about. If you choose to go through this challenge, I'm going to encourage you to also do the homework, because part of the empowered birth method that's most powerful is implementation, not just getting information. You could passively watch this training a few times and then do the homework, because I do believe in the rule of three. If you watch something 3 times, the first time is getting the overview. The second time is seeing things that maybe you didn't notice before, but are starting to sink in. And by the third time you go through it, then you've kind of got that information, and then you're able to easily implement it. So if you do feel like you need to watch it 2 or 3 times before doing the exercises, you can do that. And I'm also going to remind you that part of this is implementation. Because if you can't get out of that fear-based mindset, no formal birth education is going to help you have a true natural birth, because you're still in that lens of fear from your family of origin. So write down all of the things that you can remember learning from your family of origin concerning childbirth. And if you weren't told anything and had to find that information on your own, write that down as well as the attitudes and the messages and the lack of information that caused you to unconsciously receive, such as the shame, the embarrassment, the fear. And then think again back to day one when I asked you to start immersing yourself in the birth culture and seeing through the lens of your fear. How many of those things in your early childhood education contributed to that list of fears that you made on day one? So what you're going to basically do is you're going to look at all the things that scare the crap out of you in birth mainstream education and all of the things you've heard and everything that you're basically holding back. Those fears is like, if I just get information, I'll be okay. And instead, we're going to dig them up. And what we're going to do is we're going to then unlearn that. We're going to deprogram this. Okay, so this is all about deprogramming. And we're going to do this in the way that you're also going to get that birth education at the same time. So now that you understand what is possible, because not every kid is afraid of birth, not every kid is going to grow up in that environment. My own kids are so birth positive that I can watch an episode of a show, and if there is a birth scene or somebody is talking about pregnancy, my kids know, oh no, mom's about to lose it. Mom's about to turn this into a teaching moment, because they know me by now. So I was watching an episode of Malcolm in the Middle with my son. We wanted to do that. And they were talking about how, oh, the baby needs to be induced because it's like, I'm getting too big. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, I got on my rant and my son's like, breathe, breathe, breathe. This is actually on my Instagram as well. I put it as a little reel to show real time how my kids are reacting to birth, because they recognize it. But even with my daughter, when we're watching a movie or we're watching a TV show and there's a scene about birth and it's scary and traumatic, as you're going to learn as we go through day 3 of the Reset Your Mindset Challenge. It doesn't faze her because she knows that that is just played up for dramatic effect. And she knows that that is not going to be her birth story because she was born at home and it was peaceful and there was hardly any pain. And I was just amazed at what my body could do for having a very low pain tolerance and being afraid of needles. I was able to have this completely unassisted natural birth where all the midwife did was pull my baby from the water. So that's what's coming up in the Reset Your Mindset Challenge. If you are watching this at the time that I'm still putting out those videos, then once a week, you're going to want to come back and get the next training series. If this is further in the future and all of the videos are there, you can binge watch if you would really like to. And at the same time, I'm going to encourage you to take at least a few days between homework assignments so that you can really absorb and process and integrate those lessons. Okay? So that we're just getting started, and I'm so excited for this because the moms who've gone through this training, a lot of them decided that they wanted to have a home birth where before they had been afraid of it. A lot of moms changed their minds about getting the epidural and had beautiful natural births. There were moms that had traumatic C-sections that went on to have empowered VBACs, even vaginal births after multiple cesareans, even home births after cesareans. It's been a beautiful, empowered journey. I've loved teaching this for the last 10 years. This has really been my legacy. And now with Your Empowered Birth and all of my resources on my website, I'm now at the point where I just want to get this information out there. So if you found value in this, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, pay it forward, drop this into the mom groups. I deliberately made sure this wasn't behind any paywalls, not even needing to have an email subscription, so that this training can be like your jumping off point. At certain points in this challenge, I'm also going to be telling you about how to go deeper with your empowered birth, because this is, again, the tip of the iceberg with just a little bit of the right mindset to start to shift you towards that empowered birth experience that you deserve to have, because every birth can and should be a beautiful, empowering experience. And when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life, and no one can take your power away from you again. So thank you again for watching. Have a happy, empowered birth journey, and I will see you soon. Namaste.